You are. So, welcome everyone. In keeping with the established protocol, we'll start with a karakia tinatanga. So, tuia ki ranga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki waho, tuia te roto, tuia ki te here tangata, karongo te po, karongo te ao, omi e, hui e, tai ki e. So, welcome to this meeting of CDF. Just first item on our agenda is confirmation of the minutes.
I'll move those, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The previous meeting. So, and I'll second that. So, all those in favour say aye.
Right.
Against? Carried. Now, just looking for where on
Apologies.
apologies. Do we have any apologies? I thought we had apologies from Brian and Glenn.
Glenn's
No?
online.
Glenn?
Can you hear us all right, Glenn?
Apologies from Sandy.
Yes.
Gretchen's online. And Glenn's online.
Very good.
You
Oh,
just-
looking very
just a
healthy.
general C apology, obviously.
So Brian's still an apology?
Brian is here.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
then he's got council meeting.
He was just going to be late, was he? Or is he not coming at all? Just that.
No.
Okay, so I move we accept those apologies. Seconded, came up. All in favour say aye.
Right.
Against, carried. Okay, really nice, concise agenda. It came up, but now it seems to have disappeared. I'm going to try that again. Yes. So, and also confirmation of the agenda. So I move that the, there are some additional items for the agenda.
Yeah, we've had those included with particularly a appointment of our local controller for Central Otago, as well as some recovery settings, an update on those that come to us this week. So there's a couple of late additions to them.
Yes. Be honest, I'm not on this one that I've just pulled up. Mind you, this would have been attached to my calendar item, so it may not have had the.
Definitely got that one.
7.8 is in the agenda, the recovery, and 7.9 was the late paper, the appointment.
Right, 7.9 I'm missing. That's right. That's fine.
So if you
So I've got a
can-
chair's agenda here. Maybe I'll look at that paper version. It's
When in doubt,
up to date
With
and
technology.
super reliable. Thank you. So we have the late paper. Everyone's got the late 7.9 on their agendas, so we can just confirm the agenda as most people have it. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded, Tamer. Thank you. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carry. And we've confirmed the minutes of the joint meeting 27 March. Moving on to the terms of reference for the joint committee. So 5.1,
Those are just standing items there just for reference. I don't think the committee needs. to-
nothing new, nothing we need to do about that. Good. So there are no action items for the committee, joint committee terms of reference. Report items. So 7.1, the coordinating executive chair report.
So I'm happy to tender that on Steve Hill's behalf.
Yes.
Most of the material within that I can deal with within my substantive report.
Right.
So happy to take that report as read, take any questions that might be forthcoming from there, but noting that I can deal with most of those within my report.
Right. Any other comments?
I had a couple of questions that might come up in that.
So you wait till then?
That's fine.
Irrigation.
So it takes us to 7.2, group manager update.
So happy to take my report as read, noting that there's been a few things that have hit us in the last 7 days. So I'll work through those before I get to the work plan report, and then I can go through a few details. Short questions in relation to that. So first of all, an update regarding the Emergency Management System Improvement Program, EMSIP. Cabinet is due to release a paper on the 22nd of June. That'll inform investment for the system for the next 5 to 10 years. Also noting that some of those things have already been signposted and referring to the recovery network settings that are a later paper, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. That seems to signal that some of the recovery activity may come out of NEMA and sit within DPMC, but we need a fuller understanding of that once that EMSIP paper is released. Additionally, if we refer back to the NSWE report and the government's response to that, it was also accepted that reduction might sit outside of NEMA as well. The welfare coordination may go to MSD. So there's just signposting a few things there that have been previously agreed to in reports, and we'd hope to hear from that within that substantive paper. They will have impacts on us in terms of our activities, certainly in NEMA and by extension through the group as well. So that's EMSIP, but we await that report with interest. Happy to take any questions on EMSIP before I move on.
I see none.
Great. So moving on to the EM bill, many of you will be aware that there was a discussion document released by Cabinet in relation to the bill. That submission period ended on the 20th of May. We participated, when I say we, Emergency Management participated as part of a special interest group submission. The special interest group for CEDM consists of all CEDM group managers from around the country. We formed our practitioner view and submitted that. Of note, that was put through KEG as well, who have formally noted that submission. A few key themes that I thought, and recommendations that I thought I'd mention here. First one around community and iwi Māori participation. We've strongly supported change and endorsing systematic shifts to empower communities as the first tier of emergency management. We believe that the legislation in that space perhaps needed a little bit more ambition than was initially stated in the discussion document. We're keen for mandated roles in terms of iwi participation in committees such as this and for KEG as well as discussion around civil protections for particularly the community as first responders and what that means. And there's always a challenge within that PCBU space for councils and those organisations for those first responders as an area of tension as we have it. So we'd like to see more clarity there. Second area around clear roles and accountabilities. We're looking at roles of controllers being formalised, understanding distinct roles between group controllers to local controllers, and how those powers are inferred from the CEDM group to group controllers. So some real clarity there. Looking at strengthening governance, particularly understanding the role of this committee, your collective responsibility as a CEDM group versus your individual responsibilities as your own respective councils, and getting a clear delineation between those roles and responsibilities. And there was also some discussion around having chief executives as default controllers, be it group controllers for regional CEs and local controllers for district CEs. We thought there would be some challenges there, particularly around how it conflates EM business with business continuity of councils in there as well. We would see ultimately that, as with other delegations, that those roles would likely be delegated to individuals such as myself anyway. So we thought at the moment that was probably a bridge too far and unnecessary as it was currently proposed.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just because you're a CE doesn't mean you're a great controller. No disrespect to the CEs in the room, but I've always been told you have the right person for the right role. So just because you're a CE doesn't mean you're the best controller.
That was just a system perspective we'd taken there, so fed that through. The third area for us around minimum standards and system performance, looking at mandated standards for the system and stronger powers for the CEDM director, being in this instance John Price, to set rules and monitor performance of groups, bringing that universal standard and hopefully trying to avoid some of the postcode lottery challenges that we have that currently exist. Also looking at that extending beyond just CEDM groups and having a level of national accountability and having a broader assurance framework for NEMA, not just CEDM groups, and also having a better link in terms of risk reduction and underpinning national standards based on that risk reduction as an objective measure. So looking at some more detail there. Fourth area around essential services and infrastructure, we supported a more inclusive essential infrastructure model. Of relevance to this committee, and particularly the Regional Council, was the inclusion of flooding infrastructure within that remit. So again, we believe that it should be included and have a broader scope. Of note, fast-moving consumable goods is likely to come out of the lifeline space and sit within a logistics space, but that's just what's been signalled at this stage. Business continuity, we're in favour of mandatory standards for business continuity, particularly for critical infrastructure. However, we didn't see the value in penalties. I thought there'd be more value in guidance and support around setting standards rather than penalties per se. And then finally, in the infrastructure space around information sharing, it's quite challenging for us at the moment in the lifeline space that we get commercially sensitive information, that we are challenged to share it more widely because of those sensitivities. So how we actually consolidate that information, deal with it and share it, noting those sensitivities. And then finally, the emergency powers modernisation. So the ability to use electronic means and verbal means for declarations at the moment, we're still quite antiquated. Utilising written forms on paper, we can move that into the 21st century. Maintaining mayoral authority for district level emergencies, whilst also recognising the role of the group when necessary for those broader emergencies, but those are dealt with within standing orders for the Joint Committee. So we're happening with the maintenance of the status quo there. And then access and cordon management, clearer legislation around that and some national consistency. So that was the general gist of our feedback with the discussion document. Additionally, within the last couple of days, we've had a request for additional consultation on the legislation. Two areas in particular, first one being offshore islands. Look, I'm not going to speak to that today. It's not relevant to us. Predominantly Canterbury and Bay of Plenty, as I understand it.
Still on Chatham.
Yeah.
Okay.
So not particularly relevant for us. However, what is relevant, an identified problem that has been identified by NEMA policy as part of the bill review is currently no requirement for reporting on the rationale for states of emergency or transition periods or the need for extension. So there's no reporting on that. What we do at the moment is when we are seeking a state of emergency from a mayor, we will have to justify the powers we need and the rationale. So that is included. We then have to communicate that through a national gazette. However, there is no broader reporting into NEMA and there's no visibility from the CEDM director around those powers rationale use. So generally, I don't see as this change as too onerous. I think we need to safeguard, though, an element of second guessing in terms of local decisions made. I think we need to be quite careful around the extent of that reporting and what that will eventually lead to. The last thing we want is an element of second guessing at a national level for local decisions made. So I think there's just an air of caution around that. So we'll feed back to that as best we can, given the timeframe. We've got less than a week to respond to that. So pretty challenging at the moment in terms of those timeframes. So that's the EM bill. I'm happy to pause there.
Yes. Perhaps I could add a few more. So we received 400 submissions across the country, and Matt's pretty much knocked most of them off. Sorry, in terms of what they are, but there's a couple of others that are quite valid as well. So post-event funding processes is another big one that is being looked at, and that's around allowing iwi to claim directly with the Crown rather than through a council. The other ones are basically the recognition of Marai as a critical asset for community response. So that's a big one that they're looking at. You've covered all the others around the controller's powers. Another one is the clarity and responsibilities and governance structures, particularly around recovery management, and the paper that is presented today talks a little bit about the significant event recovery, and probably have a chat about that when it comes up. But that will be a big piece of work in the EM bill. And the final decision rests with the Minister and Cabinet. So the draft bill has been written at the moment through the Parliamentary Council Office, which will go to the House probably later in the year, and go through the motions of the first reading and then into the select committee. So you'll get another bite at the draft bill in the select committee.
Well, I mean, it's good to have, because they'll incorporate all the feedback and come up with a further draft, then you get another shot.
Yes.
We'll to see with that. Has there been much coordination with other areas around the country?
Pretty much, as Matt's mentioned, most of these key submissions are coming from all the groups and all the agencies.
So they're all, so what I'm getting at is, did they all come up with them individually and lo and behold, have all said the same thing? Or did everyone get together and figure out where
There's been
the agreement?
workshops. There has been workshops. Mayors and CEs have had workshops with our policy people as well.
Great. Good to know. Question there. Glenn, got a question?
Thank you, Chair. Look, just clarity on what was the CEs? Was the draft bill looking to make the CEs mandatory controllers? Was that what it was seeking?
Yeah, so they're looking at stating chief executives would be controllers by default, with the ability to delegate to appropriate staff as needed.
And sorry, what was the policy team's response on that one? Because our preference is for the CE to look after the operations and not be a controller, and that's what we've organised through QLDC.
Same.
Yeah, look, our advice is aligned to that. We're aligned with the status quo. It's sitting with the group controller, and then designated appointed local controllers rather than the chief executive. So we're aligned there.
Okay, and you mentioned fast moving consumer goods not being in lifelines. What was the rationale behind that?
Good question. I probably can't feed that. It's not front of mind at the moment, Mayor Lewis, but I can feed that back to you once I get a brief from NEMA.
Okay, thank you. And last one, you pointed out the clarity of this committee. I take it that's more to do with roles, responsibilities, and probably more importantly, accountability. Is that extended into the Lifelines Committee? Obviously, looking self-interest here.
Yes, it would certainly be my hope. So they're looking, particularly as it relates to the group, at Section 17 responsibilities, which define both collective and individual responsibilities in the same section. So it isn't necessarily that clear. I'm hoping that they will seek clarity across all facets of emergency management through the bill, so it is clear.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
From some earlier where you're covering off the KIG stuff as well, and it might be also a little bit of a question for Glenn. We talked last time, and I think the time before, about lifelines and people not attending, and the KIG was going to follow up on lack of attendance. How did it go? Yesterday, was it? Today?
Yeah, we had pretty good attendance from councils, so we're pretty happy with that. So I think we only took one apology from one council. Apart from that, really good attendance from all of the councils. It's great.
Yeah, we had just the usual ones, Kiwi Rail and Port Otago. So they didn't attend. So maybe a little bit of public shaming might get them motivated. But the fast moving consumer goods have been really great. They've really engaged now. So it'll be a shame if they're moved from Lifelines. And I see Mel's just clicked on if she wants to add anything.
I agree, especially foodstuffs. We've had a great communication with them. They have had quite a high turnover rate of staff, but they've been extremely good to keep the contact going. I think the lens of where FMCG might go will be sitting under the logistics because of the freight and moving things around, but it would be good to get clarification on that justification.
Maybe we can just have a chat offline, Matt, about Port Otago.
Yeah.
Surely we should be able to deal with that.
When you're talking fast-moving consumer goods and logistics, and, you know, you've got foodstuffs, for instance, in the room, surely Kiwi Rail and Port Otago, for that matter, would want to be there. But in particular, Kiwi Rail. It seems a bit odd. Do they say anything, or they just?
Outside of a general apology, yeah, I couldn't comment further than that, but it's certainly, I think, something we can follow up offline.
Yeah, I mean, it's not particularly onerous and the number of meetings and everything else, but at least if they're on the same page, it's pretty helpful.
Agreed. Not sure that Glenn or Tamer have much to do with Kiwi Rail, do
No, you're welcome to extend.
I just realised I do actually have rail in my district, Kingston.
The Kingston Flyer.
you? Groceries might be a bit old.
No, well,
You gotta get that Earnshaw able to carry their own. Move it up from Kingston, connect it back to Invercargill, you'd be right. All right, oh, well, any further?
Yes, no, so next matter for me, there was a couple of weekends back, National tested the emergency mobile alert system. Happy to report that we've had 90% cut through there, which has been steady year-on-year increase, which is great. Also flagging our community preparedness survey. Our annual survey goes live next week. That'll run from 16 June to 30 June. Survey will consist of 29 questions, should only take about 5 minutes to complete. We're doing a broad spectrum in terms of promotion. You'll see QR codes appearing on several apps, Waitaki, Central App, Queenstown and Wanaka. We're doing a push through the ODT, through War FM, Facebook. All Gets Ready subscribers will have an email sent as well. And there'll be some things on our website. So we had a really good response last year. I think Eric will probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had in excess of 2,000 last year, which was great. So I'm hoping for another good result in that space. And that is all from my report. Happy to take any questions.
Another opportunity for questions, any? Anyway.
The group plan risk review, a couple of those things that have remained a moderate risk, the viability of EOCs, ECCs, including alternatives and minimal hazard specific planning. Have any of those been mitigated to any extent by the long-term plans or annual plans that are coming through councils?
Not that we've seen, and we would look to deal with those risks as identified as part of our group plan process. Maybe more substantive work there. But essentially those have remained static and will do so until we land a group plan to figure out some more consolidated ways of dealing with those.
So we've just completed the regional risk review, which went through the Science Resilience Committee last week. So that's a full review from our hazards team of effectively all of the hazards in Otago. So that can now be used to identify specific hazards around the region as they relate to CEDM, whether it be infrastructure or community risk. So that was quite a key piece of work out of our natural hazards team, who will liaise with CEDM, and they have been liaising with TAs as well in terms of how that information could be used for future planning.
Sorry. Just gonna
Through
make
the
it up.
chair, could I hear Matt Dave Ward from Dunedin City Council stepping in alongside my colleague Mike Perkins for our Chief Executive Sandy Graham. Can I ask a schoolboy question, please? The trend is left to right good. The trend,
On the table.
The table is level. It's
you're saying it's
decreasing.
level.
No change.
Ah,
Yeah, no
I was
change.
seeing it as a direction
Yeah,
of travel.
no.
Getting better, we
Yes,
thought.
yes,
You're saying it's static.
it's static.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Schoolboy questions.
Yeah, and so look, just something well, close to a schoolboy question. In terms of seeing stuff in our long-term plans, you know, ours is, well, we've certainly done the budgeting, but we're in a position to be able to write something in it still, I think. This is looking querulously at the executive team members, but some comments on perhaps civil defence hazards and community resilience centres and such like that. It was because, can you spell out what you would like to see in our long-term plan, please?
I can in terms of the world according to Matt, but
Yes.
unfortunately, we would want that to be a part of a broader process involving community consultation as part of a more consolidated group plan process. I think there's a good steer in that we've had strategies landed both in terms of community resilience and training and capability that I think are directly relevant and will remain relevant through the group plan process. So I think that's a pretty good steer there. And I understand that Dunedin City have already been cognizant of those strategies in the LTP process, which is great. But I'd hate to preempt any broader group plan process, particularly as it relates to community consultation. I certainly wouldn't want to jump the gun there.
Yes. Sorry, that doesn't answer my question in terms of what would you like us to write into that plan in the next, we've got a couple of weeks to put some comment on what we're doing, where we're at, and what we might do into the future. So just a signal to the community, some background discussion of what's been going on. I mean, I look at the graph of Dunedin City, it doesn't look too bad compared to others. So, you're talking about community consultation and a longer term plan, but I think might be helpful to have a paragraph in there somewhere talking about where we're headed or what we're thinking of or whatever.
I think there's certainly something I can
steer on
follow up with Mike offline.
Yeah, we've been having some discussions about community resilience groups and what the interactions are between the DCC, the community boards and those groups. So we've been having some good dialogue, good discussions and meetings addressing those types of issues and how we will interact together.
Yes, so all I'm saying is that it might be timely to put in a paragraph of what's been going on and where it's heading in our long-term plan, because you made the comment that you're not seeing anything much in long-term plans, and we're in a position of being able to write something in a timely fashion. And Glenn possibly also. Glenn's got a question.
Thank you, Chair. It's just with that work plan there on page 29, and it just gives you the Otago Emergency Management Team there, and a bit of feedback. I think we had hearings in Wanaka, and the Wanaka Resilience Group made a comment that there were no emergency management people in the Upper Clutha, Wanaka. And I had to point out, well, I know one because I deal with one for Lifelines, and I can see there's two. I'm just asking the question, how does the team engage with these resiliency groups?
Well, there's direct engagement. So I'm looking at Jackie Lambeth in terms of Wanaka will be the resilience advisor there, or so she'll have direct engagement, which I know she does on a frequent basis with those groups, and that's commented on later in the report. You can sort of see the activity that's been undertaken there. So although we might not have an advisor residing within Wanaka, there's certainly we have a full-time advisor that has Wanaka as her remit and her area of focus as a geographical area.
Thanks, Matt. And the other question, just one more, page 49, and you've got Queenstown Lakes there, and you've got those percentages. Just a quick one, Frankton there went from 92% in March 25 back down to 62% readiness, I assume, to May 25. How does that occur?
Often, and look, I'm speaking in general terms now because I don't have specific knowledge of that, but in general terms, we have challenges with personnel. So all it takes is 2 or 3 capable folk in the community to disengage from the group, and capability will go out the door with them. So quite often we'll have to bring new folks into the mix and then bring them up to speed. So it's I'd say these are never going to be a fixed point. They're always a living process as we engage with the community and as people in the community and volunteers come and go. So we try to maintain a base level of capability there, but sometimes it's just beyond our control.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further?
Yeah, since Glenn skipped ahead into the reports, I did just wonder, there's one where it's got the little green shields that show what community groups are aware, connected, enabled, capable. Do you not have to fill all the shields? For example, Youth SAR started out at aware and they're also capable, but they don't tick connect or enable. Is there
No, so that's
And
the
if it's not a
activity, the
progressive-
particular activity we've done in the quarter with them. So it's not an accumulative approach. It just says that we've had an engagement with them during the quarter. That engagement has been focused on connectedness or awareness. Yeah.
Okay. So we've done it. Done all the questions. So therefore I move that the joint committee receives the group manager's update report. Can I have a second for that? Gary. You in the, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And over the pay, well, next item, 7.3, the finance update.
Oh, sorry, just
Yes.
quickly, I just, and we didn't, you didn't put the motion for that first report, so it might be useful just to quickly duck back to 7.1. It only receives the report, but just to make sure we have done that. So that was the chief executive, the one that Matt presented on behalf of Steve.
Yes.
Happy to move, Chair, the key report.
Moved, and I'll second that. All in favour say aye.
Right.
Against.
Yep, thank you.
Carried. 7.3. Finance update.
So again, happy to take the report as read, tracking at the moment within a 1% variance. It's slightly underspent, although I will foreshadow, I think a small overspend this year. We've had to do some work to bring our radio network channel planning and that up to spec. It gives us some additional functionality and some reach into partnering regions as well. So just foreshadowing what might be a small overspend there, but at the moment tracking within budget. Happy to take any questions.
Questions? A question?
Okay.
Sorry?
You go first.
No, I'm only pointing at the question.
Okay.
That's you.
The finance reports, I think this is the third one in a row where the variance by activity in that is not included due to the finance system upgrade. Is it ever going to be upgraded?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so the we've updated it and it's being rolled out to the management team at the moment. So we've just been using it for the annual plan development this year. And then the managers will have access to it from the 1st of July, and that'll give activity breakdown, including variances. So apologies for that, but it'll be there from the first report from next financial year.
Right, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Any further comment?
Check what that
See no
is.
questions? Okay, therefore I'll move that the joint committee notes the finance report, seconded by Tamer. All in favour say aye. Nobody? Someone can say aye, please. All say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Lifelines report 7.4. And will Mel be reporting on lifelines? Yes.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, Joint Committee members. So I'm happy to take the report as being received and to take any questions. I would like to do a little update as well on, which is page 54, paragraph 2. As mentioned, we did have the Lifelines meeting yesterday. It was postponed from May. I was really impressed with the council turnout there from all 6 councils, especially the interaction and participation with the roading and Three Waters aspect of those councils. And the apologies sent in advance for those that could not make it. So really happy with how that progressed, and some really great conversations and information sharing. Also, paragraph 5 of the same page, the regional generator plan, I sent out a survey to the Lifelines utility group on Tuesday to scope the utilities, backup power supply and sources, and if they had anything in place or an MOU in place, just to get a feel for what the demand could look like in an AF8 type of situation. The similar type of survey will be sent to our emergency services and essential infrastructure as well, with the lens of I will be sending it to fast moving consumer goods, as they may not sit in the Lifeline space, they are still an essential service for the region in an AFA-like event. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Don't see any hands up in the wood. Tamara.
I made notes last night. The fuel plan that's not been updated since 2019. How often would we usually update a plan like that? Or is this sort of, the 5 yearsy mark fine?
Yes, we will be updating that, and part of the survey was inquiring about the fuel side of generators as well, which will feed into the fuel plan. And we do share it with Southland. Southland is quite thin on the feet at the moment, but they do have capacity to review it in partnership with Otago. So that is very high on our list to do a significant review on that.
Right, thank you.
Yes, Chair, just on the regional plan, the regional generator plan, which we don't have one. I think my concern is, I know locally, we're saying, well, Network Waitaki has generators and we'll just use those, but I don't know whether there's been any assessment around the demand there's going to be for those, because every, like rest homes and things probably have some of their own and things like that, but there's going to be some important facilities that don't have them, as well as our infrastructural needs. So, where does that sit as far as how do we do those assessments and how do we get a good understanding of what is there, what's needed, what should each council be buying for their own water supplies and various other things?
I mean, that's probably, two questions here around, first one around emergency response activity. And that you can undertake that as any hazard or environmental analysis as part of a planning activity for CEDAM. So we'd certainly encourage councils to review their critical sites as it relates to the emergency response. The second area you're talking about there is a broader business continuity question around how you deliver your core services in times of emergency. And the Act, is pretty clear that it still has to happen, albeit at a reduced extent under 64. So, so I'd say there's two areas there. There's one that obviously we would partner in the emergency planning space. The second is probably a question for council business continuity and how you continue to deliver your services.
Does CDM have a contract or understanding with generator suppliers that in the event of we're likely to come in and see, like say with PowerQuip or any of those large generator facilities, do we have an understanding with them that we will come to you and we will more than likely require a list of this, and this? We do.
So there is a national MOU with, and the organisation escapes me.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Yeah,
but there is one.
There's a national MOU that NEMA have signed that gives us preferential access to generators through a number of entities. So yes.
So one would assume would make a list of where they would go. So we need 5 of those.
Yep.
And they'll go there.
But again, that's a matter for, as we would say, in terms of when you're talking about pumping stations and other things, it's a question for council PCP.
Yep.
And then obviously as part of, and as we've said there, understanding contingencies for response facilities is a separate matter that we would have a lens over.
There'd be priorities in terms of like rest homes, things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would have
But at this stage,
Yes.
we don't know where these generators that we can second actually are. Is that right? Or
Well,
do
no,
we
we-
have a list?
There are broader suppliers that hold caches of these as part of their BAU business. So we know where they are. The question is
These are people that do it.
the
for commercial.
prioritisation and where they would be deployed to. But again, that would be a question in a declared state of emergency ultimately for the controller and how they manage critical resource and prioritise accordingly.
Yes, but we probably need to have a line of communication to those people who are doing, as a, part of their business, having it's a well-known business in Dunedin with a bunch of generators on site, ready for hire. But I don't know that we have a direct line of communication with them or have established, some common ground in terms of how that might work if the need arose. And Mike and Dave, do you have any knowledge of any protocols or any communication that we've had with the various people?
Well, funny you should say that. I was just talking with my colleague here about, we haven't got anything formalised, but we have got informal, we've got a contract with Q Power that do our generator repair work with us now, and we've sort of got an understanding with them, hey, we will come and knock on your door, but we should formalise that and make that into an actual a proper formal contract that we've got with them, but we have got an understanding, we will come and see you, we need this, 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 and this, not tight.
That's great. And
Yeah.
that's reassuring, just having that informal understanding and discussions for staff, especially if we're using them for, supply, which we probably do on occasion. But that leads into my main question. You've got no plan in place for communications or generators. So that's quite significant, of course, with the red
In terms
dot.
of lifelines,
Yeah, in
the
terms of
formalised
lifelines.
lifelines plan, no. However, for response facilities,
Yes.
off the top of my head, the bunker in Dunedin has a generator with contingency. Central Otago has a generator. The event centre in Queenstown has a generator. We have the ability to be able to set up a generator and run it, and we've tested it recently within the regional council. So in terms of that, there is a level of contingency around operational facilities. All of those facilities also have Starlink, and we also support a VHF radio network. So in terms of emergency contingency, I think we have plans, and those are tested. So there is a degree of comfort there. In terms of a resiliency to a broader lifelines network, no, that's still a work in progress.
Yeah, and so my question is, what are you wanting us as a council to be doing about this at this stage?
At this stage, it's for noting ahead of the broader piece of work that Mel will be embarking on for the next 12 months. Essentially, watch this space.
Sure, we can keep your stuff
Good.
going.
I think the key things, continued attendance and engagement at those lifeline meetings, which is what we've talked about previously, is making sure people turn up.
I think we did.
And it sounds like that was positive today, and
Yes.
there's obviously a couple that aren't that we can try and chase up.
It's, I specifically want to know how it pertains to us and where we're at. I think that's good. Thank you. Are there any other questions? It's good. So, that being the case, I move that the joint committee receives the report and notes the updates from the Otago Lifeline Group. Does that cover it? Yes. Do I have a seconder for that? Sure.
Go on. I'll
There you go.
second that.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carried. Next item. 7.5, welfare.
So unfortunately, Paul is unwell, so I'll do my best to speak to this. Take the report as read. One thing I will say is we recently undertook a workshop in the last week with MSD, particularly around referral process and recent strides we've taken around automation for our welfare needs assessment. So there was a great workshop that occurred last week. It's been favourably reported on by MSD. I had a conversation with the Commissioner on Monday. So we look to test that process in the coming weeks. But beyond that, happy to take this report as it stands. For noting.
Right. Are there any questions? I see none.
I'm just checking what page we're on. There was one where some other people, and I think it was in this report, went on a visit to one of those EPOD facilities. Is that under Portland or the next?
That'll be under, as part of a WCG meeting that was held at the Marae. I think there was a review there that we might go to deal with in the Mana Whenua update with Mo. If he's
I just thought I'd quite like to go for a visit to one at some point if possible. I don't know if we've got any in Central Otago yet. No, just on coast.
based on
Yeah.
customer.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Would you like someone to?
I'd just like it
organise
noted that I'd quite like to go for a visit at some point.
that for you? Just what they heard.
I just want it heard, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Okay, so that being the case, and we have no further questions or discussion, I'll move that the joint committee receives the Welfare Coordination Group report. Seconded by Derek. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carried. 7.6, Mana Whenua.
No, I don't think he is. So once again, I'll do my best. Have to take the report here as read. Probably the one area just to highlight is recent USAR training with foreign emergency out of Canterbury and local marae there. So there's been a piece of work that's been most focused for the last wee while, that training being delivered within the which is great. Probably will just make, through, if I can, through the chair, an additional comment that will be more relevant next year. As you're aware, we partly fund this position as part of a 2-year project that's due to end March next year. Of relevance is the whānau and emergency response team within Ngāi Tahu has been disbanded. So how this project will run, if there's if we want to continue it, and how we will fund that remains something that we need to investigate. That broader team within Ngāi Tahu has been disbanded, and this role will end as it currently stands March next year.
And so the in terms of an Ngāi Tahu emergency response team, that would be iwi-wide, was it? Is it an iwi-wide response team, for the whole, most of the South Island, or was it, you're talking?
It was more focused on tribal members in terms of the team within Ngāi Tahu.
Yes, but that's been disbanded.
It's been disbanded.
And so what does that mean? Does it mean that they've moved deferred responsibility to us?
Yeah, so they have disbanded the EM function within Ngāi Tahu, which affects Otago and Southland, and Canterbury as well.
Yeah.
I think Southland's due to finish in January and yours is in March.
Yep.
So we are in discussions with Ngāi Tahu about what that looks like going forward in terms of who's the liaison we have with them, because they're a big part of our response in most events. And the Crown Maori requirements is, it's one relationship is one of the big things in the bill, which we think is why they've sort of like pulled back a little bit until they see what's happening.
Well, you want to see who's going to pay.
Yeah, yes, pretty much.
Because that's a bit intrinsic part of the bill, as you mentioned earlier.
Yes, it is. And that's probably one of the reasons that they're sort of like hedging their bets at the moment.
Yeah. It's good. It's just good to have an understanding of what's, the conversation in behind.
I think it'll be important for areas that have marae that would be used in the event of an emergency, that most councils have got strong connections with marae in your areas. And obviously with Mo's role, there was a connection back to Ngāi Tahu and a link into those. It'll be important to maintain those relationships in the absence of a central point until Ngāi Tahu decide what they're doing in the EM space. So I think, it just falls back to the relationship that already exists at a council level and making sure they're maintained and they're strong. So in the event of an emergency, there's good connections to be made, because marae will still continue to play a very important part in any response.
Yes, so just to be brutally frank, if we declare a state of emergency and we dial up a helicopter to come and rescue some people, then we can forward that bill to government. Is that correct?
Depending on the nature of the use of the helicopter, if it's for welfare that can fit within the Section 33, yes. If it's for broader response objectives, no, but it depends on how we're using.
So there's a narrow band?
Relatively narrow
Has to be
interpretation
a
of welfare related claim.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in terms of use of a marae as a community resilience centre, if there's a whole lot of people suddenly displaced from their homes, the situation currently is that we cannot authorise an invoice or send an invoice on to the government.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, we can.
Is that the case?
Yeah, and we did that during COVID as part of the EM reform. They're looking at drawing a direct link between marae and NEMA for those claims, rather than having to go through a Stephen group.
Yeah, that's the change that we're looking at, is that iwi will be able to invoice the government for their costs
Directly.
Yeah.
Right. So, as Richard pointed out, keeping in touch in the meantime. It's important. All right. Great. So, is there anything further for your report?
No, in relation to the report, no.
Were there any further questions regarding Sure. Okay, in which case I'll move that joint committee notes the report from the iwi facilitator who is provided by Matt on iwi facilitation. Thank you. Seconded. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. 7.7. In my update.
Thank you, Chair. I think we talked about most of what's in the NEMA update through Matt's reports as well. Take it as read. There's probably a couple of other things that we probably could add to it. As there's a planned space weather exercise later this year, potentially critical for infrastructure and communications resilience. So there'll be something, a warning order will come out hopefully soon that will indicate what that means for each group. Catastrophic planning, which is around the AF8 planning for the South Island, has moved into phase 2. So work has commenced in that space, marking continued focus on preparing for severe events. Obviously, the AF8's the big one for the South Island. There's a big work being done there. The AF8 working group met last week, which Nick was at. I was at as a steering group there, and the plan is to evolve the planning away from AF8 into the catastrophic planning focus of NEMA and CDM groups. So the 5 to 10 year strategic plan is to move more into resilience, community engagement, preparedness, and more research into science and recovery. So there's a change in focus. So happy to answer any questions. Any questions?
Can I test the rationale for that? So obviously it's a decision being made well above, there's a group that made it, but the AF8's got really good engagement. If you look at the numbers on the road shows have been run in Queenstown and Central Otago and even because it's something that people understand, whereas it's a thing, as opposed to catastrophic planning, which could be anything.
Yep.
And my sense is you'll get nowhere near the engagement if you go to the community to talk about catastrophic planning as you would get if you go to talk about the Alpine Fault and AF8 and something that people are familiar with and want to know more about. So I'm just interested in the rationale to move away from that to something that is a bit more.
Yeah, so look, I can clarify that. So AF8 as it currently exists will still exist.
Yeah.
So in terms of the engagement piece, what we've had to date is a strategic focused area based on response planning. The challenge being is that AF8 as an entity doesn't have any legislative mandate to response plan. It's a CDM group responsibility.
Yeah.
So we're divorcing that. We've created an entity called the Tiwai Pounamu Planning Group that will take a hazard agnostic catastrophic approach to planning with AF8 as an input to that. AF8 as it exists moving forward will maintain its focus on the community engagement stuff under the AF8 umbrella. Additional to that, they will also be creating or adding to, they've got I think some year 1 NCEA syllabus resource that they've created that's being really well received by high schools. We want to expand on that and push it to primary education as well. So they'll look at creating resource there. And then there's this ongoing conduit with science partners, between science partners and practitioners in identifying areas of study that are required from a response perspective and how we actually enable that as a process. So that's the broader approach. AF8 will still exist. It will still be the entity in the community. However, the response planning is divorced from that now. CDM groups will own that as a collective.
And the other part of it as well is it opens a wider funding base as well for strategically, like National Hazards Commission would be a big funder of that, as well as private-public partnerships with like infrastructure providers and insurance companies as well. So it gives it a bit more of a wider funding base. Yeah.
Right. Are there any other questions? Okay, so I'll move the joint committee notes, the report from the update report from NEMA. Second, Gary, well done. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carried. 7.8 National Recovery Settings Update.
I can get a response from my colleague to my right. Look, this has landed at at relatively short notice. It's fair to say that we're still trying to understand what the implications are. Initially for NEMA in the national plan, and by extension, CEDAM groups. You'll see that these are tools that have been designed to help assess whether government intervention is needed or not. I think it's fair to say that these have been focused on significant or novel events where normal recovery structures would be overwhelmed. So they offer decision trees in here around infrastructure remediation, support for affected residents and dwellings, stabilization of regional national economies, other enabling mechanisms, and we're talking funding or regulatory adjustments, and broader leadership and coordination arrangements. It recognises that not all events require the same level of response, and hopefully helps to ensure a more timely, coherent, proportionate response decision-making that's tied to these. These tools are intended to be used in the early stages of recovery, and crucially with inputs from local authorities and affected communities playing a key role in shaping advice to ministers. What isn't clear for us is what role the CEDAM group will play in that, whether that is a direct relationship now that exists between local authorities and DPMC, or whether this is something that is consolidated through the CEDAM group, through NEMA, and then into DPMC. It's some of those mechanics we're still working through. But information there, we've put everything that I've received has been attached to that report for information. Once we have a deeper understanding, we'll come back to this committee and by way of a follow-up briefing, once that is clear. But again, I think this is just one of these areas that has been foreshadowed as part of system reform, of areas that perhaps are going to be moving outside of NEMA for more novel approaches.
I think you're right. It will move out from a complex, large scale event, which they've identified these ones where it's happened before. This will sit in DPMC, so they'll use these tools to make sure, to look at how the government will engage with the impacted community. I think it's the biggest one. It will be DPMC. So there's a whole decision tree to follow through for the government, whether it's complex, has large scale financial arrangements, a lengthy recovery like Christchurch earthquakes, those sorts of things. They're intended to be large scale, basically. And from reading the documents, it looks like they are national scale recovery from a nationally led event as well in response. Yeah. But as I say, we don't have the detail yet. It's probably the cabinet paper on the 22nd of June might give us a bit more of a heads up of what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it represents an escalation.
Oh, yeah.
When everything happens, starts locally and the recovery being nationally coordinated. DPMC. All right. Any questions? Don't see any questions. All right. So, thank you. So I move that Joint Committee notes the overview of recovery decision-making tools and setting options. Seconded. Taylor. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Yes. Carried. 7.9, appointment of the local controller.
Paper with you here with a recommendation of appointment for Patrick Keenan as a local controller of the Central Otago District, with a short bio within that paper, documenting Patrick's skills, knowledge, experience for the role. This obviously is supported by myself as the group controller, and the matter for you now really his appointment into that local controller position.
Questions?
No, Patrick is excellent. I have no reservations in that.
I'm happy to move the appointment.
Seconded, Taylor. So, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Carried. Right. So, any other business? No. So next meeting is 5 September. 25. That's it. So shall I Say a few words to finish. Kua mutu a mātou mahi. O tēnei wā. Mana ki tia mai mātou katoa. O mātou hoa. O mātou whānau. Aia ki te arangi. Te arangi. Homie, thank you all. Thank you for coming.